Hey, everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Rock Expanse with Mike Brunn. On this episode, Vincent LaRussa and I are going to talk all about the new Bon Jovi documentary, Thank You and Goodnight. We'll tell you the things we liked, what we didn't like, and much more. So much to cover in this episode. I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. So let's jump in and let's get started. Hey, everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Rock Expanse with Mike Brunn. Today, I have with me my amigo from Dagobah. Please welcome Mr. Vincent LaRussa.
Hey, did you ever notice you start off with a single Ringo?
Yeah, I have a single Ringo at the start and a double Ringo at the end because by the end, we're thoroughly thawed. The start is just a single thawing.
Or thoroughly Ringoed.
Thoroughly
Ring-throwed.
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 That's right. Oh, man. Good.
I want to put a disclaimer. People, do not adjust your TV or your computer screen or anything. Yes, I am wearing a red shirt. I know I'm typically the man in black or dark blue, but I figured let's change it up a little bit.
So you didn't go Will Smith on us today?
No, I didn't slap anybody.
Okay, well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. I see the red shirt and I can't help but think of your video on the ground, right? Because you had all the different colored t-shirts.
Yes.
I think it's the last time I've seen you in a different colored t-shirt.
Well, this was actually featured. Anybody wants to buy this? I'm selling it for 3 cents.
So the video is featuring Jeremy Asbrock and the red t-shirt.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm trying to think, what instrument was I playing? Maybe it was the drums. I don't remember. I have to go back. It's been a while since I watched it.
Been a while, but anyway, that is not why we are here today.
Why are we here?
Why are we here? I ask myself that question every day. Why am I here? Why am I here? I think we are here to talk about the Bon Jovi documentary. Thank you. Good night. So let me ask you, my friend, did you watch the whole thing in one sitting like I did as a nut?
No, because I started watching it later in the day on Friday.
Okay.
Maybe Friday evening. And then I think did I go out Friday? I'm not sure, but I wound up watching the rest of it Saturday afternoon.
Gotcha. Yeah, I started Saturday afternoon. We had friends over until probably about 11 o'clock Saturday night, little break for dinner and all of that. But otherwise, it was pretty much one after the other after the other. I will say by the end of 4 episodes, I was Bon Jovi'd out.
Okay, well, I could comment on some of that.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, let's talk about it. So the fact that you watched it over 2 days, what was your overall impression? And then we'll get into some of the details. What was your overall impression of the documentary?
I felt like it started off really strong and really had my interest. And by the time, I guess, the 4th episode, I'm like, okay, this is, I was like, not that I was not enjoying it, but I felt like a little bit, it was running out of steam. And then there were some other aspects of it that I'll get into that was kind of just annoyed me. But yeah, it was, like anything else, I think I'm always kind of interested in the early years, the start, how it all began. But there are certain details. I don't know if you want to jump right into it that I was just, maybe you need to, straighten me out. Did I miss some?
Go ahead.
Was I stuck with a pecan in my teeth? And
I think you might have.
I didn't really get the detail of how he got the record contract. Like, that was just like, I know he had the hookup with his uncle who had the power station studio and the whole thing. And it was very interesting how, where he came from, his childhood and all that kind of stuff. And, how he was in a cover band. And then, who was it? The one that said to him, you got to be basically playing original material. And
Yep.
And all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, there was somebody who said that, and all that was really interesting. And all of a sudden, he recorded Runaway. and then all of a sudden the album came out. I'm like, well, wait a second.
Right. Yep.
How the hell did that all happen? That's like one of the huge things that you want to find out with any art. I don't get who to
Of
document.
course.
How did you get your record contract?
Of course, yeah. No, look, I agree. And it's funny because I actually was flipped. I actually enjoyed the later episodes better than the first couple. But maybe that's because in part I felt like the first two episodes, I didn't learn anything that I didn't pretty much already know to begin with. So maybe that was part of the reason, but I agree with you 100%. I felt like there was certain aspects, and we'll go through some of them, that I wish they would have dug a lot deeper in some cases than they did. And to your point, they just really glanced over. They all of a sudden he went from being in a cover band playing clubs. It was great. They showed some great old footage in there. That was really great. But then all of a sudden, bang, wreck it out. And I'm just like, man, that was a quick jump all of a sudden. When you have 5 hours, I expect you to be digging into some key moments such as that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it just seemed like obviously the way they filmed it or whatever, they put it together, it's like modern day, back in the day, modern day, and a lot of it, I mean, it was so much on his voice, like the whole, and that was the other thing. It was like, it's a big part of the story. But then I was starting to think, is this too much of the story right now? Are we spending too much time on this? I mean, I know it's significant. I know it's like, he tried all different types of things to try to get himself, kind of back, holistic approaches, different types of things that he was doing. But and it's the type of thing where I think they're doing it like that because you're kind of rooting for the person, and you want the story to be a positive, ending, which you kind of don't get to that in a way. We don't know.
We don't know. We
still don't know. Right. But so the way it was put together, the style of it, I thought was cool, going back and forth. I kind of like that. That's kind of why I have the argument with people about the first Godfather and the second Godfather. And I always say I like the second Godfather better because they go back,
right?
When Vito Corleone was younger, and that's Robert De Niro. Then they go back. I just love that part of the way that was done.
Yeah. No, I like that too. And I like, to me, and you mentioned John with the voice and that being a predominant storyline in this. I've always had respect for John. I've got even more for him coming off of this documentary because he really showed a very vulnerable side. He, laid it all out there. He's not hiding the fact of the voice problems he has. And I was even surprised to hear him kind of acknowledging that he realized it's been going on for about 10 years, maybe not to the extreme that it is today, but I have to give him a lot of credit for being open and honest about that because he could have just swept that under the rug. They got a new record coming out and, whatever recording mechanisms they use to make him sound good or whether he's recovering, who knows. He didn't have to highlight it as much as he did, but he really, to your point, it was front and you couldn't leave that documentary and not know that John's got a major voice problem going on now.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree on all that.
Yeah. So to me, I really mad props to him for that. And I love that the whole documentary started. I don't know if you caught this with professional video footage from the Giant Stadium show in '89, which was you and I were at that show together.
Yes, so, I did realize that.
I kind of was like, ooh, I want more of that. It was kind of cool throughout the documentary. They show him kind of archiving old audio and video stuff. And I'm like, ooh, what's there? What's there? Come on, let me see.
It just goes to show you with any band how much footage, audio, and stuff that probably exists.
Yeah. I mean, there was even times when like they would record him Born to Be My Baby in the studio and they kind of showed some of that. And I'm like, oh, this would be what I really want the documentary to focus on. And unfortunately, they were just like little flavors throughout here. And I get that. But man, it just whet my appetite for wanting to see a lot more of that footage.
Yeah, I think we always feel that way. And no matter what our favorite band is, we always want to see the behind the scenes, the recording of, the writing of, all that stuff. And I just thought that there were certain other things that were just like, even when they got the Slippery When Wet, like Living on a Prayer, it was, I don't know. I just felt like they talked about the album, the cover and all that stuff. And, but they didn't really dig deep into that song. Like that is arguably their biggest song ever. Isn't it? Isn't it that they're,
yeah,
I don't know
think
what,
so.
So it's like I
It's
felt
certainly the
like
one that everybody thinks of most, whether it was their biggest hit or not. Off the top of my head on Billboard, I don't know.
I always thought that that was the one of the, you know, on Spotify most streamed songs
Right.
like of any artist, you know, in top 5 or whatever.
Yep.
And you know, they have Desmond Child on there. You know, he talks about "You Give Love a Bad Name," you know, "Shot Through the Heart," and "You're to
Hmm.
Blame." You get any Desmond comments on that, but like, you know, later on they, you know, they talk about stuff, but then at some point later on they talk about Hugh McDonald and the bass line. But
Yes.
they didn't talk about it when they were talking about the album, which is good that they did acknowledge that, but I just felt like it was a little out of order, which
Yeah.
is fine. I could understand too with, all right, we're talking about Hugh, we want to make it clear like he was like the major part of this song. I mean,
Yep.
it's really the hook,
Yeah.
the initial hook, you know, of it.
It's one of the things I wrote down is that I wish that they had folks. So I was happy that they focused on, I'll say, the original lineup. Obviously, Alec is no longer with us. You couldn't
Mhm.
have a current interview with him. But I like that a majority of this documentary was focused on that, I'll say, the classic lineup. But to your point, I was wishing I saw more of you in there because, I mean, they mentioned he was on Runaway. They eventually mentioned he was on Living on a Prayer. But I was really curious, like, what was that like for him being in the studio recording those? What was the relationship like with Alec? Like when they said this is going to be a bare all type of thing, I was hoping we'd get some of that. And you know, I turned to my friends I was watching it with on Saturday, and I said, I'm not surprised that they're scraping the surface only on some of this stuff because Bon Jovi, for 40 years, the band has always held things very close to the vest. And that's why for me, when I heard they were doing this documentary, I got excited. I'm like, oh, finally we're going to hear some of the story of why did Alec, you know, leave the band or get kicked out? You know, what was it like with him not being in the studio? And they kind of just scraped the surface a little bit on that stuff to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. You know, there were certain other things. You know, the whole Richie, we could get into the Richie thing.
Yes.
Glad he's a part of documentary, but it's just kind of like not quite sure why they couldn't make that kind of happen where they were at some point, besides the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they
Hmm.
couldn't have been in a room together.
Yeah.
That would have been like a nice little. I mean, there's obviously no bad blood, right? They've said recently, you know, there's
Yeah.
nothing, you
They
know.
they said they sat together and watched the first three parts, John and Richie together.
Yeah, so I don't, unless they kind of made up last minute. I don't know. You know, that
Yeah.
would have kind of been nice. There was a couple of moments where Richie kind of made a face at
Hmm.
something. You
Hmm.
know, it was interesting. The one scene when they went to Richie shot and it was just an empty seat.
Yes. Hmm.
You know, that was pretty strong moment. I
Yes.
thought. You know,
Yep. Yeah. No, they did a
um,
great job. Whoever was responsible for the editing, I thought they did a great job on it.
yeah. I mean, Richie was cool about it. You know, he spoke about his own issues and
Hmm.
why he had to do what he had to do, and you know, and
I loved it. I mean,
I
he
just
apologized to the band. Richie did. He apologized to the fans. I think he said something
and
like, you know, I made the right decision, but I did it the wrong way, you know, something to that
yeah,
effect. And I could respect that.
and also let's face facts. It seemed like John was a little remorseful that he might have worked the band a little too hard.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. I'm
and
glad
I
you're
think
bringing that
that
up. Mhm.
yeah, because you know perhaps things would have been worked out a bit differently. You
Yeah.
know, I mean,
Yep.
it is really insane that that tour was the Jersey tour that they did like 240 shows or whatever the hell it
Yes.
was. It's
But I sense that John was blaming Doc for that more than himself at that
well,
point.
that is true. That is true.
Mhm.
And then you know we find out how Doc got his demise in that
Yep.
whole when he said maybe the problem is you. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yes. And then that
No.
was the end of the second episode. And it ended. I'm like, oh boy, where's episode three? And then they didn't
Yeah.
dig into it as much as I thought they would. But I mean, they certainly alluded to the fact that John
Mm.
felt that Doc was the problem.
Yeah. Absolutely. You know, absolutely. And you know, and it's I'm glad they also commented. I'm not trying to remember who said what. You know about it might have been one of the engineers. I don't remember about Richie's voice and John's voice is something we've talked
Yes.
about. You know
Yep.
how that's the magic. And you know, I kind of felt a little bad for Phil X in this thing because he just
Mhm.
I felt like he was out of place the whole time.
I agree.
Like
Yep.
I was like never convinced like he's a member still. I hate to even say that because
Yep.
one point he says Bon Jovi will go on forever. I'm like, yeah, but you're not Bon Jovi.
Yep.
You're right, but I just
Mhm.
and I hate that. He's probably the nicest guy and he's a great
Yeah.
guitar player. There's nothing against
There's
him
nothing
at
against
all.
him. Look, even
But
John in the documentary said like he still can't wrap his head around that Richie is not coming back. Like I think I took from, and that's why I liked part three and part four better. I really got the hurt from John, and even David seemed really hurt that Richie left the band, and they still, a decade later, can't come to grips with it, you know? So,
Yeah, yeah,
that to me, so I mean, John did say, about replacing Richie, something along the lines of, that wasn't a hard decision to make. It just hurts to make it. Right. So, and I can
yeah,
understand what he was saying, but I felt that throughout this documentary, John was still hurting that Richie wasn't there. And
yeah,
so was David as well.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I
Yeah.
agree.
And it goes to what you were saying then with Phil X, like, Phil's watching that. And look, I think John, if Richie called tomorrow, I think he'd call Phil and say, hey, Phil, sorry, Richie's coming back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was just the
Yeah,
feeling I got.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right before the documentary dropped on Friday, there was news stories about Richie, I guess his manager, whatever, put out comments that Richie was not happy with the way his exit was portrayed. So I really haven't read that article. I've read, I really paid attention to his departure with that whole part of the documentary. And I thought it was handled extremely well. I thought they gave Richie a lot of airtime to explain his side. I didn't think anybody bashed him. There was certainly hurt feelings, confused feelings, how he could do that. But John even was, look, he had things with with his ex-wife. He had things with his daughter he had to attend to. I might not like the way he did it, but family has to come first. I don't see what Richie could have possibly been upset about the way that was portrayed. Maybe I watched a different documentary than him, or maybe you remember something I don't. But what were your thoughts?
I was kind of waiting for it, and I didn't really
Yeah.
catch it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. Was there something that was said that maybe it was hit him a little bit more personal than we would think? I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure, but I think one of us would have caught something. You
Yeah.
know?
I mean, I thought it was factual. I mean, look, he did. At the end of the day, he did not show up for a show one night. No advance notice, middle of a tour, just bang, all of a sudden he's not there. So those are the facts, right? So
Mm-hmm.
he can't change those facts, but he
Mm-hmm.
even acknowledges them himself. So I can't imagine what would have upset him about the way, unless that's just a news story put out there to gain some hype for the documentary and to gain some hype for the fact that that same day that story broke, he put out a new single. I don't know.
Could be. Could be. That's
Yeah.
possible.
That's the only thing I could think of because I didn't see anything wrong at all with the way that was done.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love, so we were talking about Doc before, and I don't know if you caught this, when they were talking about Slippery When Wet, and they had mentioned that they were talking about maybe originally naming the album Wanted Dead or Alive. And
Mm-hmm.
Doc said, my favorite quote of the 5 hours, you're from New Jersey, you're not a cowboy. I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc. Because I mean, when we did our review of Slippery When Wet, I was like, I just can't connect with that song. The man from New Jersey, he's not a cowboy. And then Doc went and said almost the exact same thing word for word. I'm like, yeah, go, Doc.
Well, history has proven that he's wrong. I mean, let's just say
Yes.
that because the song was a big success.
Yes.
Was that a number one song?
I don't think so.
No.
No, I don't think so.
No, they had a few number ones. They had
Yes.
obviously
Mhm.
Bad Name and Living on a Prayer, but
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. No, you mentioned before John working the band or the band working too hard during the New Jersey tour, which was a little eye-opening. But then fast forward to right before Richie left and they're recording whatever the new album was at that time. And I did catch John said something to the effect, because I didn't realize this with the newer album, that at one point they'd replaced Richie on at least one of the songs.
Mm,
I can understand Richie being a little annoyed over that. Although, again, if you're not at the studio, what's the band supposed to do? But
hmm
John did say, I should have learned from my mistakes of the past, and I didn't. And I think that's where John realized maybe we should have taken a break as a band for a little bit. And maybe if we did, Richie would have felt different, been able to address family stuff, and maybe he wouldn't have left. I sensed a little bit of remorse from John for continuing
mm.
to push the way he did. I don't know if you picked up on
Yeah.
that, but I did.
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Because I remember Richie saying he heard someone, he says, "That's not a Bon Jovi song. That's
Yes.
not Bon Jovi," you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is kind of interesting, They have I forgot the other gentleman's name, the guitar player who I
John
think was
Shanks.
yeah, was he like a studio guy? And then
Yeah, he
they
was.
just brought him on. Yeah,
Yeah, he was the producer, I think, at first.
yeah. Right, it's producer,
Yeah.
right? Um, it's kind of interesting how they have two guitar players to cover one now,
Yes. Hmm.
and they got a percussionist, and I kind of understand why he brought him in. He said for the vocal thing makes
Yep.
sense. So you know, yeah, it's I didn't realize also Tico Torres was that much older than them.
Yeah,
You know,
if I remember, if I knew it, I didn't remember it.
yeah, like 10 years
Yeah.
older.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that was interesting.
Yeah. Well, good.
And then it was the whole. I enjoyed. You see, this is the maybe you knew, but I enjoyed the whole thing about the whole Jersey Asbury Park, the scene there. You know, the part where Springsteen came on the stage one because he used to just hang out. You know, I mean, I'm not a huge Springsteen guy, but
That's
you
so
know,
cool if you're a high school kid.
cool.
Yeah,
yeah, and it's it's kind of cool that it was very much a part of that scene.
Yes.
You know, it was like interesting that they said, who was it said, don't say you're from New Jersey, say you're from New York. You know,
Yep.
Was that the original manager? I don't remember who said it, or
somebody
advised him of
right.
that. You know,
Yep.
and he's like, I ain't doing that. So to speak.
Yep.
So I mean, there was that. That's part of the stuff I was, that I was enjoying. And hearing some of the, you got little bits and pieces of, live performances that they were doing kind of stuff, whatever, or some original stuff, or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. And I'll say this for people watching this, I know on their website, they've been releasing a lot of live clips, audio, not video, audio, unless they've updated it with video that I've missed. But there's a lot of live clips out there, some from those early days, some from the classic years. So, if you want a little bit more of a taste of that, go check out their website, because John has been sharing little nuggets, or John's team has been sharing little nuggets on their webpage of some of that old stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So you definitely want to check that out.
I think for me, if I could just fast forward, we'll jump it back and forth. Why towards the end, it was getting a little harder for me to watch. I just, for whatever reason, and I kind of understand it. It's kind of like the how can I say it? The media machine. When it starts getting political, that's when I start losing my interest. And when they went into the whole, and I'm not saying you can't mention any stuff like how he campaigned for Gore or how he did this, but it's very, very clear you're splitting sides here.
Right. Yep.
It's very, very clear that you're saying I'm for this side.
Yep.
And there's actually, I'm not saying this because I'm a fan, but there's one point where they're showing something and there's a sign that says "fuck Trump."
Oh, really?
Right?
I didn't notice that. Yep.
Yes. And to me, that's where you're kind of pushing the boundaries.
Yep.
That
agreed.
I just don't, because you're going to offend somebody either way.
Right.
And let's face facts. Politics is basically fitty for the most part.
Yep. Exactly.
Right. So it's an obvious reason why that's put in there.
Yes.
It's obvious. And that's where, you know what I mean? Like,
I liked that they focused on the work he was doing to help other people and all of that, because he is great like that. John gives more, right.
You could show me him serving 55 soups and 35 hoses. I don't care. I have no problem with that. But when they start getting too much, that's when I felt like, I was like, all right, and that was towards the end. That's what I was getting at. That just kind of put a little of a bad taste in my mouth.
I can understand. And look, I'll say the fourth and final episode, the first half of it I loved, which focused a lot on Richie's departure and the way they felt and all of that.
Yes.
And look, I want to give them credit also. Richie was really predominant in this. I mean, for a man who's not in the band and hasn't been for 10 years, they could have done an interview with him and put a little clip here and there. He was in probably most right behind John. Like I saw more of Richie than I did of David, and Tico I felt was almost like non-existent in the documentary. Right? Richie was really predominant in there. They gave him a lot of space to tell his side of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, and that's why I liked the beginning of part 4 where they were focusing on where he left, because let's be honest, that's one of the biggest things. But then the second half of episode 4 turned into what I called an infomercial, right?
Yeah.
And that was one of the things I said even to my friends, is that this didn't need to be 5 hours. Bon Jovi doesn't have a story the way Motley Crue does, or some of those other bands. Yeah, I hate to say it, Motley Crue, I know at one point they said, yeah, we did the drugs and all of that, but they didn't focus on any of those negatives. And I'm not saying I wanted 5 hours of negative. I'm all about positive and good. But when you're watching a documentary, you need to see the ups and downs. And they kind of made reference that Richie was in rehab 3 times. So when? What was the impact to the band? Was it in like 1988 when they came off the New Jersey tour? Like I wanted a little bit more about that type of stuff. Instead, I felt like I got a bit of an infomercial, because again, I knew a lot of that stuff from the 80s. There was nothing in those first 2 episodes. Like even one of my friends turned to me during the show and was like, so they just spoke about living on a prayer for 30 seconds. Who's not Tito? Who the hell are the 2 characters in there?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Living on a Prayer. The two that
Tommy and Gina.
Thank you. Whoa, boy, I had a senior moment.
Oof.
they're like, who are those people? Well, and I was like, oh, well, those are actually based off of Desmond Child. It's somebody he dated, is Gina. And they're like, oh, why aren't they talking about that? I'm like, yeah, that would have been interesting to me to hear like some of that backstory, on there. I just felt it didn't need to be 5 hours. I'll say that. If this was 3 hours, this could have been, in my mind, a top-notch documentary. 5 hours, my money, a little too long.
Yeah. The other thing too is like opportunity lost. I don't know if they had the opportunity. Bruce Fairbairn is not alive, but Bob Rock is.
Right.
He was
Great
part
point.
of those two huge albums.
Yep.
They make one mention of when they heard the drum sound. Tico Torres was like, whoa, what the,
Yep.
you knew this was going to be special.
Yep.
This guy was in the room when that magic was happening. I would love to have heard like when you heard, Living on a Prayer on that final mix, like what was the reaction in the room? What did you guys think? What did you think was the best song? What did you think? Like, you and I, we always want to know
Yes.
the details on the songs
Yes.
more than the personal bullshit and all this other stuff. I want the deets on the song and the songwriting. And even the songwriting they didn't really talk about writing the songs. Like why did Wanted Dead or Alive? Why did you all of a sudden with this cowboy theme? Like what was up with that? Like what did things of that nature. They did address what we kind of discussed very briefly about 1700 Fahrenheit, that they thought the album was not very good. It was rushed, and it's kind of all right. I didn't have to have somebody tell me that we were both right on that. The band itself knows.
And they did say that their third album they felt was a make or break for them, which is something we discussed. Like, what kind of pressure were they under going into writing Slippery When Wet? I just wish some of that stuff was fleshed out a little bit more. And I'll be honest, I didn't expect them to spend a lot of time on the songwriting like you and I wish they would. But I will say, I remember being a fan from pretty much day one. In 1990, coming off of that New Jersey tour, I remember a lot of stories where I thought the band was going to break up. And then John puts out the Blaze of Glory album, and it seems like he's going solo. They touched on it, but I wanted that story fleshed out, because that's the first, I'll say, drama I ever remember with the band being like, oh, wow, they just came off of 2 huge albums. Are they on the verge of breaking up? They touched on it, but they kind of made it sound like it was a media thing more than anything. And they, and I don't know, I just wish I would have heard more from each of the guys about it and what were they thinking. I wanted that to be fleshed out more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I shouldn't feel like that after a 5-hour documentary.
You're right.
Now, saying all of this, I have to say, online, I've read a lot of comments yesterday and today, and 98% of the comments are saying people love the documentary. Absolutely. I've seen so many people say, this is 10 times better than the Kiss documentary that came out a couple of years ago. I'm actually surprised to see so many people saying how much they loved the documentary. I don't know if that's because they just didn't know the Bon Jovi backstory or not. I don't know.
Well,
go ahead.
You know what it is? I think John comes off as being a very likable guy, number one.
Yes.
Anybody who can admit they messed up or they're vulnerable. And the band's had a lot of success.
Yep.
And again, it was well done. It's a great story. And so 98% of what you read, I'm surprised it's that high, but that's good to know.
It might even be higher than that. I'm hard pressed to think. I'm saying 98 to hedge my bets. I'm hard pressed to think of a single negative comment that I've seen about this from anybody. It seems like everybody's loving it, which is great. And look, I hope that it actually helps raise awareness of the new album coming out. I think the first single, Legendary, to me, it sounds catchy. It sounds good. John's voice sounds okay. What were you going to say?
It's interesting because, when you hear all the songs in a row from a lot of those albums I didn't listen to, from the mid-90s on, but it's certainly Bon Jovi has a formula. I mean, every chorus I hear when they played some of the songs I was less familiar with, I'm like, oh yeah, there it is.
Yep.
Oh yeah, there it is. And I'm saying it in a positive sense. Like,
right.
Whoever the songwriters were, I know it's not purely just John. I think the Blaze of Glory album was I think he wrote that whole album pretty much.
Yeah, I don't think that there's nobody from the band, Richie.
Yeah.
co-writing with him. I don't remember if he co-wrote what Outside is. Off the
Yeah,
top of my head, I don't
probably
remember.
did. I mean, it probably was. I'm just going to check that now.
And while you're
Fact check
checking that,
that.
so again, just where I want to give credit, I love that they even acknowledged that, yeah, John was off doing Blaze of Glory, and they did talk briefly about Richie doing Stranger in This Town.
Yeah, yeah. They
And
showed the Arsenio Hall.
yeah, exactly. And I was like, they did not have to go into that because it's not like Stranger in This Town was this huge success of an album. They didn't have to, but I love that they did. They did not mention, and I said this to my friends, that the Stranger in This Town album was basically the entire band, less John on that.
Mm-hmm.
And,
that's
and
true.
to me, it goes back to that thing of believing the band was going to break up. John went one way and everybody else went another way. Now I know that they talk about eventually they go into like some kind of group therapy and all of that. I know they spoke about that, but I'd really love to know, like, was the rest of the band thinking, hey, we're going to hitch our ride to Richie and we're going to start, this new thing, even if it's a Richie Sambora solo thing. Did they think that that was going to be the path they went on? I've always been curious about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did write the entire album except for the last track, which it's like 1:16, which is probably some whatever. But yeah, it was all purely him.
Interesting. Okay. Really quick for you and I, one of the things I did not notice at the start of this, they were showing rehearsals for their 2022 tour, and I didn't realize it. Apparently they rented out the Meadowlands Arena for that.
Oh yeah,
I didn't even realize. Yeah, I thought they knocked it exactly. I was like, wait a second.
First of all, it's the Brendan Byrne Arena. That's how I know it from its original name.
True. Yes.
When I went to go see Kiss there, it was the Brendan Byrne Arena.
It was. Yes, you're 100% right. I love that they rented that out. And John was like, yeah, I wish this place is still open. We could probably sell out 10 nights in a row over here right now. That to me was one of the most coolest things about the first two episodes. Like, wow, even though I'm local, I did not know that thing still was in existence.
Yeah, but I'll just, just make a comment of something. Still, because you asked me this question, I think on one of the episodes talking about the album, I still stand firm. If Richie's not in the band, I'm not going to see the band. I still feel, even after this documentary, I think watching it made it even more clear to me how there's that void of that voice and that presence. Yeah. And again, no disrespect to those other guys on the stage. No. But there's something magical when those two voices work together, and it's not the same.
It's not. And they pretty much acknowledge that. That's why they're bringing in two guitarists, a keyboardist singing. Also, they realized it took a lot of people to fill those shoes.
The Eagles go on without, Glenn Fry, and people go see it. So I know I'm
probably Fleetwood Mac without Lindsey Buckingham is what I thought of, because he left and they brought in two guitarists to replace Lindsey. Yeah. That's what I thought of with the Bon Jovi thing. Yeah. But yeah, let me ask you this though, because I'll be honest, this part I totally forgot about. John doing movies in the early 1990s.
Oh yeah, I kind of forgot about that. I remember once accidentally seeing him on a movie.
Really?
Like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, I forgot. Even though I think Destination Anywhere, his second solo album, was based off of a movie that he was in. I could be wrong. But here's my question: what do you think would have happened if he actually became successful as a actor?
Well, if you saw the thing with Siskel and Ebert to talk about it, was very favorable. They said it's like fresh face. It's got a. So it's. Listen, what do I think would have happened? That's a great question. Yeah. I think John is such a hard worker. He would have managed to just keep going and doing both. I mean, look after doing the New Jersey tour and all that stuff, and he's writing a whole album, and the whole thing of Blaze of Glory and that whole thing, and I didn't remember too of how good of a frontman he was or is. I don't want to say it was. That's not fair. Yeah. We had the fortune of seeing, at least in the 80s, for me, when we were together, 2 or 3 times. Yeah.
And I've always said I think Richie is a better singer, and I'll stand by that till the day I die. But John's a front man compared to Richie is no comparison. It's not even close. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's no disrespect to Richie. John, I think, is just a very good front man.
It's interesting because unless you've never heard it, if you listen to, You Give Love a Bad Name, and Richie was doing the lead, would it still be as good? I know that's not one of your favorites from the record. Yeah. I'm not saying he can't sing it, or Living on a Prayer. Richie's got a tremendous voice, but it's almost like the order of such was the perfect order. John, then Richie. You know what I mean?
The success that they had, it's impossible to disagree really with what you're saying.
Right.
But now saying that, I do have some boots of Richie, especially in 1991, 92. I think where he was doing solo shows, and he does Bad Medicine and Living on a
Oh,
Prayer. And while I don't
it's
need to
just
hear
amazing how
Bad
they still
Medicine,
think they still think that song is great, you know, and that whole
I
thing. He's like,
know.
I came up there, your love is like a bad medicine. I'm like, fuck this fucking song.
I'm like, so
They
you're the
still
one
think,
to blame.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly. It was
So
him.
you wanted to hear about songwriting. Just the one song they spoke about is the one song you didn't want to hear them
Oh,
talk about. The
no,
song.
I agree with you, what you're saying. You know, I did hear that stuff.
Mhm.
You know, it's like, you know, the Paul Stanley singing Dr. Love. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you try to picture that in your head,
Yeah. Yeah.
two totally different voices, so to speak, you know.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
you know, yeah.
Yeah. I'll just say this also. We were talking about Doc before, and I got the impression, well, pretty much they said it. Doc was not a fan of John going into the movies and all of that. And I think if
Yeah.
Doc was either not edited or was talking honest, I think he'd be like, yeah, John sucked as an actor. I felt like that's what Doc wanted to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I didn't so much get that feeling. More
Okay.
though, I think, you know, it's the whole Star Wars thing. Stay on target,
Yeah.
no
Uh-huh.
distractions. You're a fucking rock and roll band.
Right.
Keep putting out records. Keep making me money. You're not gonna. He's not
Right.
gonna. Is Doc making any money when he's doing
That's a great
movies?
point. I never thought about that. Probably not.
Yeah. So that's kind of what I got from that.
Hmm.
Um, but hey, listen, John is a tremendously talented, probably, you know, I think again, back in the day, Bon Jovi got made fun of a lot, posers this week, you know,
Mhm.
but you know, as songwriters, you know, you kind of can't, unless you knew the exact splits of who did what.
Right.
Because a lot of that stuff was Richie and John, Richie and John, Richie, John, and Desmond, you know,
Yep.
Richie, John, you
Yep.
know, so
The only song that I've ever heard of, and I don't know if it's true, that I've heard all the rumors that Richie was basically 99% responsible for, and John tacked his name on it, was Never Say Goodbye. I don't know if it's
interesting.
true, but that I've heard numerous times that that was basically Richie's song, and then John just like, I'm going to change just one word and give myself a writing credit.
Interesting.
Yeah. In fact, even I think the original demo is Richie singing it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. So it
Hmm.
just lends credence to the fact that that's. But I agree with you. Look, obviously, I think there's only one song in the entire catalog that doesn't have John's name on it as a
Mm-hmm.
co-write, and
Mm-hmm.
that's "She Don't Know Me." Every other
Mm.
song in the catalog, John is at least a co-writer, if not the only guy on the song.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
as I'm watching the documentary, I'm thinking of this also. It's amazing how they came back with the song "It's My Life," whatever, 10 years after their last hit. I was trying to think of this. Can I think of another band that had such a huge hit the way they did with "It's My Life"? So many years separated from their prior hit. I can't think of any.
10 years?
Yeah. Between, I mean, because "It's
I
My Life" was a
mean,
big hit.
I don't know as a big of hit, but you know, when Paul Simon had the Graceland and it hit You Could Call Me Al in like 86,
Yeah, that's good.
I think it was maybe late 70s. He had a, you know,
Yeah,
and
and
that's the only,
okay, so now
you
I'm going to
know,
say Heart and Aerosmith also probably.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But 10, that's a lot. That
yeah,
might be tops,
yeah, yeah.
you know?
It's like I kind of forget sometimes that I know Bon Jovi withstood the whole grunge movement and all of that, and but
Yeah.
then when that was done, they came back and arguably had one of the five biggest hits of their career after that.
Well, you know what Bon Jovi's great at, and then song after song, I'm like, their fucking themes of their songs,
Yeah.
you know, they're you know, their titles are just so anthemic in just the title alone. And like they're
Mhm.
great at writing songs with great titles,
Yes.
you know, and
Yeah.
that's, man, you as a writer, you're fucking envious of that. Like, fuck,
Yeah.
why didn't I think of that?
And you were
You know?
saying, who does what. And when I interviewed Desmond, I remember him saying one of the things he always comes with a title in his pocket. So I wonder how much of that is Desmond coming in with like, hey, this is a cool
Well,
title.
and to be fair, It's My Life. We all know that Talk had that. And then, you
Yes.
know, they were the, not that, you know, there's many songs where many bands have had the
Yes.
same title, but it wasn't like Bon Jovi was the first one to think of it. But it's what do
Definitely.
you do with the title?
Of course. Yep.
You know, and you know, the thing that's great about that song is that the sonics of it sound so good.
Yeah.
It's got great production. It just sounds great, you know, and it's a type of song, you know, I covered that song for the longest time. to the point where I just told the bands no more.
For the longest time. Sorry,
Yeah,
wrong
it's
band,
all right.
wrong artist.
Wrong artist.
Yeah.
And I just got so burnt out of that song. And then more so recently last year, started doing it again. And every time I do it, I enjoy it. Did you? You know,
You
so
love to do it.
yeah. So that's very hard to do.
Yep.
Very hard to do.
Yeah. One other thing I want to ask you, because I've seen this comment a few times where people thought Richie was drunk for his interview. I did not think that.
I mean, there were a couple of moments, to be quite honest.
Mm.
He sounded a little slurred in his talking.
Okay.
He did.
All
I'm
right.
not
So
saying
you
he was
picked up
drunk.
on that. Yeah, no, of course.
Yes.
But
A couple of times.
interesting. Yeah.
Very,
So
very
I
little.
did-
There was a couple of times,
Okay.
you know. And it's also kind of hard sometimes when you watch these things because we all get old or whatever, but Richie, to me, he looks tired to me.
Yes, he does.
You know, he look a little tired. Like you see David Bryan, he's kind of, and even Tico Torres, you could see he's older than the rest of
No,
the guys.
David
but-
Bryan looks like he's as young now as he was in '87.
Yeah,
I don't know what
with
that
curly
man's
wig,
doing.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
But it's just, you know, you see where the wear and tear.
Yes.
You know, when you've had that kind of lifestyle, when you've gone through divorce, and he, I mean, I was even surprised he mentioned Heather Locklear with the mental illness. That's getting a little personal, in my opinion.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, you know, they said and then they showed Heather Locklear. I'm like, oof, that's like throwing her.
I guess
bit,
they felt it was okay because the fact that she went through mental issues or concerns or whatever words you want to use, that was public news.
Yeah, but it's also piling on.
Yeah.
There might be a lot of people who didn't know that. And Heather Locklear, I
Maybe.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't know if they get if he said to her, "Listen, I don't know what kind of I'm
No,
speculating."
I think they still do talk, the two of them.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I know at least as of a few years ago, they still were in communication with each other and would see each other sometimes. I'm not saying like in a dating way of seeing each other, but when she was struggling a few years back, I think Richie was with her.
That I did hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's where I say, you know, Richie leaving Bon Jovi, you know, maybe he needed to.
Yeah.
Maybe he saved a life, whether it's, you know, Heather, whether it's his daughter, who knows, right? Not that I want to be overly dramatic with it, but maybe he only scraped the surface on that, right? And he kept a lot of the information private, and maybe he needed to do that. Yeah.
Perhaps.
And we're just thinking as fans, oh, we want him back in the band. The band's not the same without Richie, you know, but maybe he had no choice.
Yeah.
But I'll say this just in closing here. I do come away with this with a newfound respect for John, not just the honesty he has with his voice issues and all of that, but just what a workaholic he is and still is, you know, and, you know, that's where I say I give him a ton of credit for he's, I guess, somewhat of a perfectionist also, which is why he won't go out there being only 80%, like he was saying, can I give 100% of 80%? You know, I give him a ton of credit because we see so many artists out there being a fraction of what they were, and they still do it. Now, I know John doesn't need the money, blah, 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 but he still has a whole organization, what they say, like 120 people that he's responsible for, and you feel a certain pressure for that. And also, there's clearly a love for what he does. You know, that came through to me big time. That man loves what he does for a living. Whereas I can't wait to retire when I'm in my 60s. He would work, I think, and write songs till the day he dies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that's about everything I had. I don't know if you had anything else to talk about it.
The only other thing is, I'm just refreshing my memory.
Yeah.
You know, when you're that popular, or when you're considered one of the best looking guys, frontman, and you got all these girls all over you, and you got this high school sweetheart that you know, and they said we've had our ups and downs, but how did that dynamic really work? I would have liked to get a little bit more info on that. You know, I don't want them to admit, oh yeah, I cheated on her, I did it, you know, whatever. You know, I don't expect that to that detail, but that's, you know, I mean, just think about that. 240 shows. He's not with his family. He's not with her. That's fucking rough.
They could have just struggled on. They could have focused on the struggles of being a married couple. Yeah. And your husband on the road. You know, they don't have to say the cheating and all of that, but just the impact it has on a family, kids, and all of that. You know,
they did later on when they said they were all bringing their kids. You know, that kind of impact, but not that other kind of impact. That I would like to have heard a little bit about. Agreed.
And that's where I say, for a 5-hour documentary, there were things I enjoyed about it, but it felt a little bit like a fluff fest is the best way to say it. And the stuff that I wish they dug into, they didn't dig into enough. I felt like it was a 5-hour infomercial so that they could say at the end, hey, here's our new single.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair point. Fair point.
But saying all that, there were things, and I'll say it again, John's vulnerability, the fact they gave Richie so much airtime, I came away from that impressed. So better than the Kiss documentary. I try to take my bias out. I'm not sure that I agree that this is better than the Kiss documentary.
Yeah.
If for no other reason, but the Kiss documentary wasn't 5 hours.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
True. And it didn't have some of the political stuff that I mentioned.
Right. Exactly.
So
Exactly. So, but we look forward to seeing, reading, hearing your thoughts and comments. Did you watch the documentary? Have you watched all 4 hours? What was your take on it? What was your take on the whole doc situation? Did you drive them too much in the New Jersey tour? What were your thoughts about the whole Richie departure and just the whole documentary in total? We'd love to see and hear and read your comments and thoughts. And as always, there's no wrong or right answers with this. It's just different opinions. And I fully expect to see lots of people saying they loved it because that's what I've seen online all day and all night over the weekend. So I think that's a wrap, my friend.
excellent.
All righty. What should we do to end this one? I don't know.
Never say
Bye.
goodbye. Never say
Oh, there you go.
goodbye.
Okay, very good. We'll never say goodbye, except
Yeah.
we're going to say goodbye.
Goodbye, yes.
All right, later, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Later.
Alrighty, there you have it. We'd love to hear your thoughts and your comments on the Bon Jovi documentary. Thank you and good night. What parts did you like? Where do you wish that they dug in a little bit deeper? And was there any parts that you didn't like as well? We look forward to reading and hearing your comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. If you're listening to one of my podcasts, subscribe over there as well. Also, you can follow me on Facebook at The Rock Experience with Mike Brunn, where each and every day we talk about all the rock and roll music that you love. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter as well. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. See you all next time.